Welcome to Canadian Coffeehouse Crime. My name is Catherine, and today's case takes us to Yellowknife. Canada is broken up into two sections, provinces and territories. The three territories are the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and the Nunavut. Yellowknife is located in the southeast part of the Northwest Territories, and it's close to the Alberta border. It is the only city with a population of 21,000 people. Because of how north it is, the angle of the Earth is different, and the sun's activity is significantly different. In the summer, Yellowknife gets 20 hours a day of sun. This is a picture of Yellowknife at midnight in the summer. In the winter, the sun sets at 3:30 p.m. and doesn't rise until 10:30 a.m. Some of the sights to see in Yellowknife is the Prince of Wales Northern Heritage Centre. You can always rent a houseboat on Great Slave Lake. Yellowknife has a Winter Snow King festival where you can try your hand at ice sculpting. The indigenous people of the territories are called Inuit, and they created the igloo architecture. What causes aurora borealis is when the sunlight meets the gas in the atmosphere. It creates a beautiful glow in the sky. This is the area of Canada where you find Arctic penguins, sea lions, Arctic foxes, caribou, dog sled racing, and the polar bears do walk down the streets. On Friday, September 18th, 1992, RCMP were called to the area of the giant mine, 6 kilometers away from Yellowknife. Apparently there was an explosion. When they arrived at the scene, they were directed to one of the tunnels where the explosion had happened. A group of miners that were 750 feet or 250 meters or a whole block underground in a gold mine on a transport car, when the car that was on a rail like a train hit a trigger that was connected to a bomb. The bomb detonated, killed all 9 of the miners that it was carrying, and apparently the remains were scattered around the tunnel in a horrifying scene. The RCMP that had been called up from Edmonton had one question: how did a union dispute go so out of control and cause one of Canada's worst mass murders? In 1896, gold was first discovered in the Yellowknife area. In 1930, gold mines started opening up around Yellowknife Bay on Great Slave Lake and formed the city Yellowknife. This is known as the Gold Rush. In 1948, Giant Mine was opened, covering 2,300 acres of land. In 1948, gold was being sold on the stock market for $34.71 per troy unit. A troy unit is 31 grams, a golf ball is 46 grams, and a precious metal can be considered silver, gold, or platinum. In 2021, a troy unit of gold was sold for almost $1,800. Giant Yellowknife Mines Limited owned the company from 1948 to 1986. A company called Pemore owned it from 1986 to 1990, and then Royal Oak Mines Incorporated bought it. In 1980, gold was doing really well and was selling for $600 per troy unit. And between 1980 and 1990, Giant Mine was a major contributor to Yellowknife's economics. It had 230 employees, and they were making an average of $77,000 a year Canadian. In 1990, although gold dropped and was only being sold for $350 per troy unit, and the mine obviously wasn't making any profit. When Royal Oak purchased the mine, the CEO, who was the co-founder of Royal Oak and who had built that business into Canada's 6th largest gold producer, her name was Margaret Peggy Witt. And apparently she was very good at her job. The Northern Miner Journal called her the Mining Man of the Year. In 1992, Peggy decided to try to restore the profits. She decided she had to play a little hardball and cut perks for unionized members. The disciplinary measures were bumped up, and she wanted a 6% wage cut from the employees. The employees were represented by the Local 4 CASAW, Canadian Association of Smelter and Allied Workers Unit, and they didn't like Peggy. Something about her being a female rubbed them the wrong way. But they did come to a little bit of negotiation in April 1992, and the agreement was that when the prices of gold fluctuated, the wage of the employees would fluctuate. 72% of the union members voted for a strike instead. After this, things got ugly, attitudes went up, and the union planned to go on strike on May 23rd. So the company planned to lock out the union member employees, but decided to keep the mine open and use replacement workers instead. These replacement workers were located across Canada and flown in, and were brought over the picket lines by helicopters. They stayed in temporary housings and were fed at the mine location. The replacement workers, of course, were harassed by the picketers. They would blow air horns at night to try to keep them awake. And since they weren't a fan of Peggy, they would hold up signs calling her Miss Piggy. Other attacks included hurling rocks at the mine buildings. Then a security guard was assaulted. A shack was burnt down. Then they knocked down an electric power line. So Royal Oak hired a fleet of guards called Pinkerton Guards, whose primary goal was to intimidate the strikers. A handful of union workers decided to cross the picket line and go back to work, which caused an uproar amongst the families and the neighborhoods. The replacement workers were nicknamed scabs. If you crossed the picket line as a union member, you were labeled a scab. Two strikers, one named Al Shearing and Tim Betker, who called themselves the Cambodian Cowboys, would break into the mine. They would spray paint threatening warnings on the tunnels. They set off bombs on the main satellite dish and once in the ventilation system. After this, the riot RCMP squad were called up from Edmonton and were put into action one night when the strikers stormed the mine property, breaking windows and assaulting Pinkerton guards until the RCMP fired out warning shots. 38 miners were dismissed for that. The territorial government wanted the federal government in Ottawa to force a binding arbitration, and that is when a third party settles their dispute for them, but they wouldn't intervene because it was the private matter, not a government one. A resident of Yellowknife actually wrote to the papers asking the violence to stop before someone got killed. 6 of the bombing victims were union members who had crossed the line, and the other 3 were replacement workers. Chris Neal, 29, Joe Pander, 55, Norm Hury, 53, Dave Vodnosky, 25, Shane Riggs, 27, Vern Foloka, 36, Robert Roswell, 37, Malcolm Soller, 38, and Arnold Russell, 41. When the news of the explosion and the death of the employees reached Yellowknife, shit hit the fan. Fights broke out in the streets. The tensions in Yellowknife were over the top. Union strikers were accused of murder, and the union blamed it on Royal Oak for not keeping its employees safe. When the RCMP found a blasting cap and other bombing equipment at the scene, they came to the conclusion that it was deliberate, and homicide detectives were called up and they opened up an investigation. The investigation ended up being the most labor-intensive case in RCMP history, as it involved 300 police officers interviewing hundreds of union members, Royal Oak managers, and replacement workers, and it lasted 13 months. The giant mine shut down only for a week after the explosion, and Royal Oak refused to settle the negotiations until the murderers were apprehended. The police did have parts that were left of the scene, and they also found a fresh boot print leading down the shaft into one of the mines. Of course, the Cambodian Cowboys were the number one suspects, but there was no evidence that pointed to either of them. Detectives had one clue they based their investigation off was the fresh footprint found at the scene. They had the footprint analyzed, and it came back as a size 11 Kamek boot. There was one individual, a union member, who did show his boots to the police that were a size 11 Kamex boot, and the soles had been defaced. But he had been questioned many times, and there was even a polygraph, but the test came back inconclusive. Interrogation expert Sarge Greg McMartin was positive as that individual, and on a hunch, he arranged for an appointment with this individual for a lengthy interview for October 1993. The individual confessed. The gentleman's name was Roger Warren. Roger Warren was born December 17, 1943, making him 49 years old in 1993. At the time of the blast, he was a father of 2 girls. He was a seasoned miner, and his nickname was Ace. Also, he was skilled in blasting and breaking rock. During the investigation, he scarfed about the replacement workers, calling them scabs. On camera, he took the investigators to the tunnel at the mine, and he showed them how he set it up. He explained how he got his sticks of explosives, lined them all up, connected them to a tripwire that a passing rail car would trigger. He said he never wanted to kill anyone. He just wanted to scare the replacement workers and embarrass the Royal Oak Incorporation. While Warren was awaiting trial, the federal government finally stepped in and ordered an end to the strike. 18 months after it started, 96% of the union strikers went to accept the negotiation that was pretty much the same as it started. In December, 130 strikers went back to work. 1/3 of the replacement workers were laid off. The Cambodian cowboys were not invited back. They were actually arrested, and Al Sharon got 2.5 years. And Tim Bucker got 3 years for their bombings of the mine satellite and their ventilation systems during the strike. In September 1994, Roger Warren went on trial in front of presiding Judge Mark DeWeert, and he recanted his confession. He said that he was in a state of depression during the interrogation and felt browbeaten into confessing. The Crown, although, showed the jury the video of him at the crime scene with the RCMP, explaining in great detail how he set the bomb. After 4 months of a trial in front of families and widows, Roger Warren was sentenced to life for second-degree murder. In 1997, Roger appealed, but it was denied. He maintained his innocence for 10 years, and the Association in Defense Wrongly Convicted actually looked into his case, but they did not pursue it. After 18 years in jail, 2003, he confessed again. He said he recanted his statement in court in 1994 because he did not want to admit his guilt in front of his family and let them down. He didn't want his family to know that he had done something so stupid, and he was sorry for the pain that he had caused. Because of his admission of his guilt, he was granted day parole and was released at the age of 70 years old. Many people do not agree with this, and also many people believe he did not act alone. He was paroled to Mission, BC, where he went to church and did volunteer work. He would fix equipment. He once painted the halfway house. He died July 24th, 2019, at the age of 75 in Abbotsford, BC. The Northwest Territories WCB, Workers' Compensation Board, filed a civil lawsuit against the territory government, the union reps, and Royal Oak to compensate the families of the victims, 17 of whom were children. $10.7 million was granted in 2004, but it was appealed for the fact that the union, the territory, and Royal Oak were not the murderers. Roger Warren was. Sue him. Due to the severe drop in gold, Royal Oak was forced to bankrupt in 1999. In 2004, the giant mine was closed because of asbestos contamination due to 5 decades of mining. There were 15 sealed underground storage chambers that contained 237,000 tons of arsenic dust, only 250 feet below the surface of the earth. If mixed with water due to flooding, this threatened to drain water mixed with arsenic into the Yellowknife Bay, and it needed to be contained. Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada have been working on the issue to remedy the giant mine in the area around it since the year 2000. Thank you very much for joining me today on Canadian Coffeehouse Crime. My name is Catherine, and I'll see you in the next case.